again. Thanks everyone for being here. We all spoke briefly before the event, but it's really nice to meet in person. So I was hoping to start out with a question about how you all bring the body into your work and somatic experiences. As we all know, traditionally psychotherapy and psychiatry have really centered, their tools on the mind and located suffering really in the mind. So how are you moving away from that model? Nicole, do you want to start?
I can.
Yeah.
So I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I've been in practice for 18 years. And the last 8 years or so, I've been using ketogenic metabolic therapies with individuals as a treatment. They seek me out specifically for this purpose. And of course, I guess that absolutely is a somatic therapy, isn't it? Because what I see, and part of why I'm so passionate about what I do, is I see an ability to connect with their body in a way that I've never seen with any other biological treatment, bio pillars of a biopsychosocial model. So in my many years as a psychotherapist, often, and I know there's other psychotherapists in this room, there's a acute dissatisfaction with the treatment effects that we see. And medication, I've been very touched with the conversation that's gone on here, because over my 18 years, I know I've had people that I've lost for suicide after they've been put on psychiatric medications, and you just kind of know it, and you don't talk about it, and you don't really say anything about it, and you just go on to the next person. And I'm really touched to be here and to be part of this conversation and kind of hear that and acknowledge it. Something very validating about that. But sorry, that's the problem with not a scripted talk. You go off. But yes, very much a somatic therapy, very much a really strong biopillar of a biopsychosocial model of practice. And I truly find the psychosocial only components now a little bit unsatisfactory to work from. You really kind of have to have the big picture and think about that biological pillar, that somatic piece.
David?
Yeah, let me say something. So I'm a general practice doctor, and I've been prescribing and deprescribing psychiatric medications my entire career. In the past 15 years, pretty much only deprescribing. And Cooper, right, I got drawn to benzodiazepines like really early on, right after my residency. I had Allison come in. Allison was on Ativan, 0.5 milligrams 3 times a day, just coming in for me to renew her 90 pills for the month. And I was stopped cold when she came in. It was like, what? I don't understand. This hadn't been an issue that I'd seen in my training. So the thing I really wonder now in retrospect that drew me to this, because Allison and I shared the exact same birthday. And I was aware of that at that visit, that she was exactly the same age as I. And I think that had quite an impact on me at this time, very early in my career, that here's a problem. So that drew me to the Heather Ashton's work at Newcastle University in England, and learning about the Ashton method. And I'm really appreciative, Mark, for your work now that adds to that and clarifies that. But that's the deprescribing part, okay? I actually, these days, yes, there's an art to deprescribing, and there's a lot to it, but I'm so much more drawn to, I cry easily. I'm so much more drawn to the question, if not the meds, what next? So what? What is it that we need? What is it that actually helps us? And this comes from my own story, because my father is a psychoanalytic psychiatrist. And I had this sense growing up that the only way that I can really take care of my inner conflict is by figuring myself out. I'm going to think about myself. I'm going to try to understand what the hell is going on in me. And I'm going to use all these people to try to help me, things that they've written, and really try. And as a kid, growing up with that, when I was in conflict with myself, I would try this, and I'd start to dissociate. I'd start to leave. I felt this fog come over me, like I cannot think about myself. So it doesn't work. Something must be wrong with me. I cannot see my situation and my struggle. And it was only recently, the past 10 years, that I began to learn about somatic work. And it's been such a lifesaver for me, and it infuses the work that I do as a deprescriber. So somatic work, there's a lot of different types of somatic therapies. Focusing, EMDR, internal family systems, Hakomi. There's probably at least a dozen more. And some of these are written about in Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. A great book to read if you want to read a book about this that gives you a sort of an understanding of the treatment of PTSD and the use of body work. But somatic experiencing is really appealed to me. It's simple. It may be so simple that it's unbelievable. And it's simply about being in touch with our felt sense, immediate, direct, here experience of my physiology, of what I'm sensing, and slowing down, like I'm doing with my voice, to sense and to feel. And the surprising thing about this, and we've mentioned it, it's come up today, about the innate wisdom, the healing capacity, that in the slowing down and sensing in and noticing what's happening in our body, we can find incredible information. So maybe that's all I'll say right now.
Thanks. So when we all spoke before the event, we talked about other paradigms to move toward away from the biomedical model, the traditional biomedical model. I believe, Roger, you name-checked spirituality in that conversation. So I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about how that comes up in your work with people. And anybody else, if you want to jump in afterward, guys.
Sure, thank you. I'm still moved from the last presentation, and I find myself reflecting on Molly and Laura to a pretty deep extent. I feel like it deserves us kind of extending that a little bit. I interviewed Molly, I think it was probably 2 years ago, Molly. I am struck by the difference in you, even listening to your work as well. And I think that's I think that occurs when you create life, when you carry life, when you produce life and you have a child. I think it really does change you. And what I've been observing within our culture is really a battle, an anti-human approach to the human experience. And I see that as purposeful. I see it as an intentional act against our interconnectedness. You know, one of the things that I love about being in a collective group like this is that you experience an energy. And that energy is related to, I think, the fact that there are souls here that have embodied into this human experience for a mission that's much greater than them. And we feel it, and there's an intentional act to disconnect us from that. And the psychiatric industrial complex has been a weapon of war. It's been a weapon of war to sever you from your internal experience. Because I think often, what would it take to really decimate a culture? What would it take to create mental suffering, create disease, and make it prolonged and chronic? Well, one, you'd have to put yourself in a war with nature and a war within yourself. And one way to do that is to pathologize the inner world and the inner experience of being human. It's an attack on our humanness. And when you do that, and I think it's been a systematic psychological operation, if you're able to really reflect historically on materialism and scientism, you see that they ignore our spiritual connectedness to God. I mean, that's like a bad word now. We can't even say the word God. We don't even mention the word soul. We think the mind and the brain are exactly the same thing. And I've had so many conversations where people are afraid to talk about our soul, our energy, our spirit, our shared purpose. How did we get there? Right? The only way you can get there if that was systemically brainwashed out of you, because even right now, 85% of Americans are going to say they feel connected to something much greater than them. And that is why we're here today. We're here because we are connected to something greater than ourselves. So much of what we're talking about are how do we respond to the mass poisoning of our culture, both in pharmaceuticals, but in ideas, and now in technology. And so we are vulnerable and really at risk to, I think, abandoning our sovereignty and our freedom of our mind, because there's a battle for our mind and our soul, and that's the technology. And we're seeing the after effect of all of that. Since August, I've pretty much haven't watched or turned on a television. Completely disconnected. And I'm a big Eagles fan, season ticket holder. Go Birds. To not watch one NFL game this entire year, right? And guess what? I feel so much better. No more beer commercials. I'm not getting pushed to free pornography, gambling, competition, and like feeling I have some connectedness to the outcome of a game from men who are making millions of dollars. Like, that's a way to distract us from what is important. And then you see the consequences of all of this within our culture. We're in a culture of decline, and that's why we have a mental health industrial complex to continue the severing us from the divine. Chris Masterjohn, good friend of mine, he was just recently on Joe Rogan podcast. He was on a Radically Genuine podcast, did a 7-part series on SSRIs. And he discussed them as mitochondrial poisons. Right? And we don't think about our cells, our DNA, as being connected to a greater source consciousness, to a divine nature. Like when we quiet our minds and we don't surrender our minds to technology, to government, to entertainment, and we just quiet our minds, there is an intuition, there is that inner compass, and I will tell you from personal experience, you will be guided. I had to be woken up, and I still sometimes don't trust it. That I can sit, connect to a greater intelligence and ask and be guided and be downloaded information to help the person in front of me. Or I can have a conversation, my body can start buzzing with energy, which I have experienced here. That post-material science is a stronger science than the materialist atheist science. That telepathy exists, that we can heal ourselves. The placebo effect is not some nuisance to try to get a drug to market. It's the body in alignment with nature and a belief in your own ability to heal yourself. Love isn't a Hallmark card. It's an energy force. It's an energy force that can heal. And so I want to put myself out of business because I think the state-sanctioned psychiatric, psychological therapy culture is a failed paradigm that creates professionalism and detachment. If you follow the rules, your clients will get worse. You know, I realized very quickly that when someone tells me they want to end their life, they don't really want to end their life. Because if they want to end their life, they're not going to tell you. They want to be saved. They want to feel like there's something bigger than them. They want to feel like they're important. They want to get out of that story, that narrative that's built in their minds, that nihilistic identity, because they feel empty, because it's a culture of emptiness. We're going to want to fill it with more and more interventions, more and more drugs, more food, more sex, more. It's not how it happens. And the more we continue doing the same thing, we're going to be down the same road, we're going to be sick, and then we're going to surrender our authority, our independence, to the medical establishment, which has been conditioned. It's why you have 80% of Americans forcibly taking an mRNA experimental vaccine to change your DNA. I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it's good people with positive intentions, because it makes no sense. And a lot of what we talk about here makes no sense. There's a paradoxical effect with emotions. The more you try to control, suppress, avoid, the worse you're going to feel. It's a root cause of disease. And then you enter into this paradigm where saying feeling nothing, numbing out, is somehow feeling better. Where is the dark night of the soul, the hero's journey, that your soul came here for something much greater than you, and you chose some of these experiences? I can guarantee you that, because without challenges, you're never going to be able to find the light. And there's a polarity that exists in the human experience. You have to embrace and accept the polarity. You are not going. That's why I hate these words: major depressive disorder, depressed, anxious, the label on everything. It's an energy. It's an internal energy that the moment you label it, you are diminishing its actual power for transformation. So anything that puts you in an environment to label, to judge, to suppress, to limit, is going to be a root cause of disease. It's going to be a root cause of suffering. The moment you allow, and you allow that to move, you are now moving in your life past the energy of fear, and you're into something greater on the other side. And I do believe that there is a loving force that is guiding us. And I hope there's some degree of an awakening, right? The physical body matters. Listen, you mass poison the body, it's hard to feel okay. But we're also poisoning the spirit. We're detaching from the soul, and we're disconnecting from all of nature. And that's another way to think about like universal consciousness and intelligence. Is beyond that, that the more you become disconnected from nature, the sicker you're going to become.
Okay. So I think we've heard a lot today mention the term patient-centric mentioned. And I know that a lot of people who've had challenging experiences with the traditional mental health system, and I count myself among them, and we walk away from that with a little bit of a difficult relationship to authority, particularly medical authority. I believe when we talked, the four of us before, you used the term bottom-up, like a bottom-up treatment as opposed to a top-down. But at the same time, you have people who come to you, who pay you for and look to you for guidance on how to heal themselves and how to help themselves. So I'm wondering how you navigate that, how you maintain a sort of patient-centric approach while still being a sort of reluctant, if maybe reluctant is the right word, authority figure, if that makes sense. I'm happy for anybody to jump in. Go ahead.
I'll go ahead. In psychology, there is supposed to be a management of authority, but of course there's inferred authority going to an expert. And so how do you manage it? Gosh. You know, how I practice now, and there's many books about this in psychology, about how you come into the field trying to be very evidence-based, trying to be very protocol-based, trying to provide evidence-based treatment, and having that be very celebrated and validated and considered good care. And what you find after working for many years is you start to put that away, and you start to sit with the person, and the therapist, the psychologist, and the human being that you are is truly becomes one instrument. You stop thinking about, oh, I need to bring that DBT skill in, or I need to do this CBT thing. And so really, I feel like as a very mature therapist that's been doing this for many years, and I'll join you in your woo-woo to some degree. Not that it's woo-woo, but what many people would consider would consider, why are we having this conversation? Like, what is this guy talking about right now? He's not wrong. There's the most therapeutic thing I do is hold the vision of that person well and thriving when they cannot. That's really the strongest thing I do. And I think that for psychologists who are struggling still within the system to try to provide this standard of care, right? And that's a really difficult thing for them to do, to really truly sit in the room with someone where they're at and hold that vision for them as they guide themselves through that journey. And a lot of what I do is point out that you already know the answer. You're just resisting what you're experiencing. And then that really helps people find their way.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. I'll tell you, the culture of medicine and being a physician conditions you to begin to believe that you are supposed to know it all, and you've got to know it all, and you'll even make it up if you don't know it. And I think one of the most valuable things I've learned in my career and in working with patients is to say I don't know. And it really helps me, because I've found that, there have been these clear moments, like Roger, you're pointing at it, where I've been in the exam room with people and I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, and I stop. And there is this moment of silence between me and the person I'm with. I'm not saying patient, the person I'm with. And wouldn't you know that so often the thing that needs to be said or known comes up in what they tell me and what comes to me. So, I had to learn this and then began to look for it, too, to look for being with people in this way. And being myself, being open to silence, and listening in this way, not just to the person, but listening to me, and just listening. So it's been a profound revolution in my clinical care for people. It's why I call my practice slow medicine, because it takes time.
well, I'm in recovery from being an authority. You know, I did all the things I was supposed to do. You go get board certification, you publish research. You know, I'm Dr. Roger McFillin, clinical psychologist, board certified. You know, you put these credentials out, and you realize that it's empty, because I've been interviewing clinicians for the past 20 years, and here's what I've found: it's for every 250 people I meet, 249 of them sound exactly the same. They're repeating the same indoctrination over and over and over again, and I have no idea who they are as a human being. And then I've tried to train clinicians in working with somebody, and they're so caught up in their own head trying to do some formulation based on one of the 200 different kinds of therapy orientations that exist, and they think they're seeing the person from a lens as something mechanistic, like there's broken within them and they have the power to fix it. So I've kind of walked away from that. Like, I'm much more interested in like having dinner with the crappy childhood fairy like I did last night, and her uncle, you know, and understanding like how do real people who aren't conditioned by the system and have had these experiences in life, like how do they overcome challenges? How do people really thrive? And do they create a life of meaning and purpose? And it's usually the opposite of what I was taught. They stayed the fuck out of the system. You know, they did not go put themselves on pharmaceuticals that were mind-altering, that blunted their emotional states. They showed their emotions as something that was extremely meaningful to them. They faced that pain, and then they're just really easy to talk to because they're not that worried about what you think. Right? We've been conditioned over and over again in our culture just to worry so much about how we're going to be judged, and we end up conforming. And when you conform, nobody's really different anymore. You lose that authenticity. And so that's what I love about my work, because once I take down the therapy industry, it's not going to be available anymore. But I do enjoy some parts about therapy, which is that like intimate connection with another person. Even it's in this like sanitized environment. I find it sad, to be honest, because you want to have those conversations with, you know, people who love you in your life, whether that is family, whether that is friendship, or is that someone that you just meet at a conference, like that genuine, authentic connection. But somehow we can't do that anymore. You know, somebody is in deep pain and you go, oh, I'm so sorry. Did you think about seeing a therapist? You know, and I wrote an article about this, is how did we get there culturally? How is everything outsourced to a professional? Well, the only way that could happen is if you were told that there is somebody outside of you that has this expertise, this something you know that you inherently do not know within inside yourself or your neighbor doesn't know, and you marinate in that fear, right? So now you become, there's fear of the other. And what's the other now? I'm fear of you being crazy. You know, I'm fearing your emotions. I fear that your behavior is outside the limited and constricted version that we have sold to you in American culture. Sit down in your chair, listen to that teacher, raise your hand under this artificial lighting, and why don't you take in some dyes that are known to cause attention and behavioral problems, and when you don't act within the way that I want you to act, I'm going to label and drug you and push you in the pharmaceutical industrial complex. And listen, I love the fact that we're here. For some reason, I feel like it feels pessimistic in some way, but I'm looking at data, and what I'm seeing in my community is I don't get to have these conversations. I feel like I am in an algorithm, and we may all be in the same algorithm. So the question is, how do we wake everybody else up, right? And that's, I don't know. I think we're creators of our own reality. I know it's woo-woo. So what I do is I quiet my mind, I create it in consciousness, and I hope that it plays out. And all right, I ended up on this stage. Step one.
Can I say something? I think that presence demands energy. So, you know, we're all on this stage working in our minds from a different paradigm to some degree, right? How we see the extension of somatic therapies, and we see the extension of where psychotherapy could go, if anywhere at all. And I think that takes energy. the population that I work with, using a really powerful metabolic intervention that improves energy throughout the body and in particularly the brain, I get the privilege and the benefit of seeing people feel like they can actually be present with another human being and the people in their lives for the first time, or for after many, many years of not being able to. Being plugged in to spirit, being plugged into human relationships requires energy. Absolutely requires energy. And so in kind of talking about the environment that we're in, and you brought up a lot of those pieces really, really well. The things that we do in our environment that impairs our energy, the chemicals, the lights, the poor sleep, the distractions, the disconnection from human beings, the manufactured stress of things in a world that doesn't need to be in our space. These impair our energy production. And so I just wanted to make sure to kind of share that my experience as a psychotherapist that uses a very powerful metabolic therapy as something that creates energy that I see makes it possible to really be able to do some of the beautiful things that you're trying to bring up on this stage today.
So, similar to the panel that I did earlier today, I want to end on a note of sort of what we see changing and what we hope will change. So I'm wondering if you see or feel any greater openness in the broader mental health community or broader medical community in integrating these tools, some of the tools that you guys talked about, and if not, or if so, like what do you think would be required to incite the kind of change? Yeah, Nicole.
I'm excited to talk about that. So I have continuing professional education for psychotherapists on how to ethically support someone who's going to be using a ketogenic diet or other metabolic therapies as a psychotherapy professional, and how to stay in their professional roles around that. And I will say that they're the ones that that I've encountered that have seen some of the transformations that occur, they are very excited and very open to adding this into their biopsychosocial pillar of practice. And it's actually very optimistic. I will say, like we talked today about psychiatrists are human beings who want to help people. Psychologists are also. And I think that once they understand that there are other treatment options that can, make therapy or any type of tools that people want to experience to explore their lives and explore their identity. And gosh, that's a whole nother topic. Like when you work with people who feel that they are in remission and recovered and present and all hands on deck and all wheels on the ground, I don't know the right words, but once there's an identity experience that happens, or a shift in identity and sense of self, and then later I would say transcendence. Yeah. And so I am very optimistic about it, and I'm very hopeful, and I'm not just making that up. Like, I get messages from therapists all the time. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this. I had this client, they improved using this, and then we did the best work. Right? Or they left, they didn't even need me. Like, it's really exciting. And so it's a good thing.
That's great. Whichever one.
Yeah, let me be a pessimist. I mean, that's because,
this,
well, Roger, you end us on a good note. So, because I'm in this world of medicine, and I've needed to step outside. I've needed to, and I don't know exactly, what brought me there was my own suffering. I needed more. And I don't know why suffering doesn't always act on us in the same way, like, it acted on me to say, there's got to be more. My training, my understanding, I don't understand. There's got to be more here. So my colleagues, the profession, there's very deep conditioning. It begins early on. It begins in school with, the smartest kid in class, and really being conditioned by the environment, by our environment, to get it right, to know the answer and whatnot. And the conditioning is so strong in medicine to stay in the box. And I don't know what happened to me. I sort of like something happened to me, but that's the way I feel about it. Something actually happened to me. So the waking up process in medicine, I'm not that optimistic about it. I think there's, you got to step outside, and those that feel the calling, heed the call, and I'm looking towards others. I'm looking towards other fields, other forms of therapies, and I'm looking for patients. And I'm really excited about the VA talk too. That there's movement there. So there's my pessimistic spin.
Okay, you have 3.5 minutes to be optimistic.
Here's my here's my final pitch.
No pressure.
I'm going to start negative and end positive.
Okay, that's okay.
We're one of the most propagandized people in the history of the world. We don't even realize it because we believe we're completely free. We're also one of the sickest people in the world. Okay, so the first thing is you have to get yourself out of the fishbowl a little bit. Like, you're swimming in that sick water all the time. You don't even know that you're sick. There are cultures, there are writings, there are people, there are practices that exist beyond the Western world. Right? The Western world has been overtaken by a machine, a machine of industry, a machine of ideas, ones that are powerful in just consuming more, and consuming more. So we're still using these ideas, treatment, like the medical professional is a disease treatment individual. Like, you're managing disease instead of we're not understanding why the body is at dis-ease, right? We have a chronic disease epidemic, a mental health epidemic because of those ideas. They're failed. It's a failed paradigm. You have to be open to shifting the paradigm. And to do that is to consider things like, well, we are energy. And I totally agree with Nicole. I think one of the reasons why the ketogenic diet is so effective is you eliminate poisons. You start to eliminate the poisons. You use autophagy, use fasting, and the body starts to align in a state where it naturally heals itself. Now, the material paradigm, certainly, you break a leg and you need to get it set. But the body is still healing itself. The bone is still healing itself. And that's a really good metaphor, is when we continue to get disconnected from our natural selves. And then we fall into what's going to be a frontline war with transhumanism versus humanism, right? They want to upgrade you. They want to change your DNA. It's not conspiracy. It's written. It's an idea that consciousness, they can become godlike figures, okay? And I think the response to all of that is that everything that exists with you is not broken. It's not disordered. It's not diseased. We put ourselves in disease. Right? We have to get ourselves back aligned with nature, and I think there's many ways to do it. The medical professional can become healers again, right? And what does it mean to become a healer? Well, where is that person out of balance in their life, their spiritual life, their mental life, their emotional lives? Like, we get poisoned and our bodies harm in context to relationships, when those relationships are harmful and hurtful. And we're so disconnected that people stay in relationships. They stay in jobs, they live lifestyles that make them sick, and then they go to the doctor, and now you have a label, you have another disease, you have an autoimmune condition, your body's attacking itself. No one's ever going to tie it back to the life that you're living. And that's where we need to awaken. I used to write resist to everything, but that's like way too militaristic, right? And it's creating more of a fear energy. But if you awaken, right, then you awaken to things that many of us know inherently anyway, because it's in our hearts and it's in our souls.
Okay. That's time. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. This was great.